All right, today we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating and honestly a pretty provocative idea. We're going to walk through a cognitive model, a step-by-step thought process that lays out how an entire society could end up choosing stability over freedom, one seemingly logical decision at a time.
So, the central question here is a huge one. How on earth does a whole society willingly, consciously, accept a system where everyone is dependent? I mean, when you put it like that, it sounds completely impossible. It's a choice nobody would ever make, right?
Well, the thing is, this model argues, it doesn't happen in some big, dramatic vote. It happens slowly, almost without anyone noticing. It's the end result of a really long chain of small, perfectly logical thoughts, each one just a rational response to a world that's changing under your feet.
And this right here, this is the engine that drives the whole process. It's a simple and very repeatable cognitive loop. First, you notice something happening in the world. Second, you conclude what that thing means for you and your family. And third, based on that conclusion, you demand that someone do something about it. Notice, conclude, demand. This simple psychological pattern is the key to understanding everything that follows.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning of this journey. The first phase is all about how a fundamental social contract starts to crumble. You know, the one that ties hard work to having a stable life.
This is the foundation. It's the core belief that has held things together for generations. The idea is simple. You put in the hours, you get a paycheck, and you'll be okay. You'll have stability. For a very long time, that was a deal you could count on.
And then, the first crack appears in that foundation. AI comes along. Productivity goes through the roof, but for some reason, wages just don't. And this thought starts to creep into people's minds. Wait a minute. We're doing more work, we're creating more value, so why am I not getting ahead? This is where those first little seeds of suspicion get planted.
And that suspicion, it doesn't stay suspicion for long. It pretty quickly hardens into genuine, gut-wrenching fear. Those layoffs that everyone thought were just temporary, just part of the usual business cycle, they start to look permanent. People realize the jobs aren't coming back. They've been replaced by an algorithm.
So what do? What's the gut reaction for most people? You take it on yourself. You try harder. The thinking goes, okay, fine, the world is changing, so I'll change with it. I'll retrain, I'll learn new skills, I'll grind, I'll pivot my whole career if I have to. It's that classic can-do, pull yourself up by your bootstraps response. But the real kicker is, what happens when all that grinding, all that personal effort goes absolutely nowhere? When the new skills don't lead to a new job? That's when a really devastating conclusion hits you. Trying harder isn't working. And the emotion that comes with that realization is just crushing. It's humiliation.
And that feeling of failure, it forces a massive shift in how you see the world. Your thinking is no longer, I need to do more. It becomes, the system itself is broken. It just doesn't reward hard work anymore. The whole game starts to feel rigged.
And all of this culminates in a really powerful final emotion for this stage. We're not just talking about being angry or frustrated anymore. We're talking about a deep, profound sense of betrayal. The belief starts to set in that the system, that capitalism itself, just isn't fair anymore. At least, not for people like you.
So once you feel betrayed by the system, what's next? Well, that's where you see this huge pivot. The goal isn't about trying to fix the old, broken system anymore. It's now all about just figuring out how to survive in this brand new reality.
The model we're looking at has a name for this exact moment. It calls it the psychological hinge, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's that point where a core belief you've held your whole life completely flips because you're confronted with an undeniable reality that makes the old belief impossible to hang on to.
And here it is. This is the undeniable reality, the single most important conclusion in this entire cognitive path. It's a stark, simple piece of logic. If the jobs aren't there, then my survival can't depend on having a job. Once you accept that, everything else has to change.
And you can see how that thought process directly leads to the first big new demand. Suddenly, universal basic income, or UBI, isn't some fringe socialist idea. No, it's framed as a reluctant, totally practical necessity. It's just a tool to keep society from completely falling apart.
Okay, but here's the thing about these big societal shifts. The first demand is never the last one. That initial call for UBI, it just sets off a chain reaction.
Each new demand seems to logically follow the last one, and piece by piece, you end up building an entirely new system.
So you get UBI. And the expectation is pretty straightforward, right? Here's some cash, now you're stable. But the reality, at least in this model, turns out to be very different. Inflation kicks in, landlords hike the rent, scams pop up everywhere, and suddenly all that cash just gets absorbed. That feeling of instability comes right back, only now it's mixed with resentment.
And that feeling of, hey, this isn't working, well, that's what kicks off the next domino. The logic goes, okay, cash isn't working, so don't give us money, just give us the actual services, housing, food. But to make sure that's fair, you have to stop people from cheating the system. So you demand verification, and suddenly a digital ID seems acceptable. And to make sure people use the benefits correctly, you demand controls. And that's how something like programmable money starts to sound like plain old common sense.
And this becomes the core justification that makes it all seem reasonable. It boils down to a single, powerful thought. When the only other option looks like chaos, fraud, and total unfairness, then a system built on control starts to look like the only path to safety and stability.
So after all these steps, all these logical conclusions, we arrive at the final destination of this journey, and it's maybe the most profound change of all, the complete redefinition of what freedom even means.
This is the thought that seals the deal. It's incredibly powerful because it feels so practical, so real. I mean, what good are abstract ideas like privacy or personal choice when your family is about to be on the street? Concrete needs, food, shelter, they start to feel a whole lot more important than abstract liberties.
So, you see, the very definition of the word freedom begins to morph. The old definition was all about privacy, choice, having personal autonomy. But the new definition becomes something much more tangible. Freedom is just stable, guaranteed access to the things you need to live.
And that brings us to the end of the road in this thought experiment. After this long chain of seemingly logical steps, universal dependence isn't seen as a problem anymore. It's seen as the very foundation of a new, stable society. It becomes permanent. It just becomes normal.
Which leaves us with the one really provocative question that this whole cognitive path forces us to ask ourselves. When the stability of your life and the freedom you've always known are in direct conflict, which one do you actually prioritize?